And, in the narrative in your YouTube, you mentioned that there was physical abuse, sexual abuse. I know you don't want to badmouth your parents because you're trying to uh, reestablish a solid footing with them, but we can just put that out there. And you refer to emotional abuse, and I think you said you were bullied at school.
Oh yeah, it wasn't just abuse in the household. I was definitely like that classic like the bullyable kid. Like I wore glasses and I loved reading and drawing and playing guitar and writing poetry. And so I kind of was that like quintessential kid to get picked on in pretty much all the way through high school.
Wow, that's so remarkable given where you are now. And that really is hard to believe, but I believe you when you say it. Were you kind of a nerd? Is that how they saw you?
Oh, 100%. I loved science fiction. I had a really bad acne.
Oh,
I was the kid who would rather draw or paint or use pastels. I was always very artistic. I'm wearing women's jeans right now. So I always, dressed a little differently and behaved a little differently, spoke a little differently. And I think as my mental illnesses started becoming more invasive in my everyday life, like interrupting my speech and my ability to relate to people in middle and high school, I think that only just drew more attention to me
oh
in
yeah,
the wrong way, not in a way that I wanted.
yeah, right. But what I'm getting is that you were a sensitive, artistic kid who, those kinds of kids still exist. They still get bullied, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And it's like in the world of kids can be very cruel. And often, in adulthood, things can turn around. But you really had a lot of challenges even as you were moving ahead towards adulthood. You refer to eating disorders. Was that just as a child, or did you have that as you moved into adulthood as well?
No, even now, I put a lot of effort into making sure that I'm eating enough food. Like for a long time, I struggled with anorexia and bulimia, and
Okay.
I was doing bodybuilding. So if it's masquerading as something really masculine, it's not as easy to identify. Like,
Yeah.
people who are cutting weight in order to meet a certain weight category, or people who are like, oh, I'm not going to eat for a few days so I can get my body fat percentage down before a photo shoot or whatever. And it's these things that have been kind of normalized that I've now carried over with me, and I unintentionally. And now I put a lot of time and effort into making sure that I'm eating enough food and that I'm taking better care of my body.
Wow. And then in terms of emotional problems and various disorders, uh, you reference hallucinations at some point and suicide attempts. Do you want to expand on those at all?
Yeah, I had all sorts of different hallucinations, primarily visual and auditory. So I would hear things in people that were not there, and I would see things in people that were not there. And some of those hallucinations were very exciting and Hollywoody, like I would see a wolf in my hallway or something very dramatic. And then other hallucinations were very mundane. Like for a long time I hallucinated that I had a printer, and I actually did not. So
You
there's a lot of
did,
like very, very boring, long-standing
wait, that you
hallucinations
had
that I
what?
lived with.
A printer?
Yep, just
Okay,
that I had a printer.
but you didn't have a printer.
Correct.
Yeah. No.
So I think I purposely bring that up because a lot of people, when they think of schizophrenia, they have like a very dramatic image of what they think it looks
Right.
like. But my experience with schizophrenia was varied. Like some hallucinations were very dramatic and some were pretty mundane.
Around what age were you when those began?
Probably middle school was when they first started.
Uh,
High school was when I started really struggling with them. And then college is when they became debilitating.
Oh, wow. And was I know for a lot of people there are tormenting voices saying that, how awful you are, how worthless you are, and so on. Did you have those kinds of voices as well?
Yes, I experienced that. But at the same time, like inside of the same day, I would also experience delusions of grandeur and feeling that, I was the only person. For example, for many years, I thought that if I stepped on cracks, there were small blades in those cracks, like in the sidewalk, let's say, that would
Right.
hurt my feet. But I also thought that I was the only person in the world who could see them and
Oh,
feel them and knew that they were there. So there was this idea that I was so clued in. I knew so much more about the world than these other people. So I would sometimes feel that I was worthless and, not good enough. And other times I would feel that I had this like secret knowledge that so many other people didn't have.